Welcome back to Blockstream Talk. This week we're speaking with Byron Hambly, a developer at Blockstream working on all things liquid. In this conversation, we talked to Byron about the importance of Layer-2s to scaling Bitcoin across the global south. Byron is based in South Africa, so we also checked with him on the current state of Bitcoin adoption in Africa and what the El Salvador model could mean as a proof of concept across the region. We also discussed trade-offs amongst major Layer-2s like Liquid, Fedimint, and Lightning, and the limitations imposed by the blockchain Trilemma. As usual, if you found the conversation useful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Byron, thanks for joining the podcast today.
Hey, Jesse, how are you? Thanks for having me.
Very good. So maybe we can start with a quick introduction and you can let us know what your roles and responsibilities are at Blockstream.
Yeah, my name is Byron Hambly. I've been working at Blockstream on the Liquid team since about 2022. I'm a software developer and I'm working mostly on Rust and C++ code.
So how did you get into computer science and then how did you get into Bitcoin?
Well, in high school, I started programming and had a bit of an affinity for it. So when I went to university, I decided to do computer science and maths there. After finishing there, I worked a number of programming jobs over the years. And around 2020, I started learning Rust. And that's what got me picked up to come work at Blockstream on Liquid.
All right, interesting.
As far as my Bitcoin journey goes, I did actually hear about it back in 2011, reading on Hacker News. And you should never read the comments because somehow they put me off Bitcoin for a number of years before FOMOing in 2017, probably right at the top, and then capitulating in 2018. Because I didn't understand what it was. And so I would say since then, I've sort of done my proof of work and now I really understand what it is. And getting started working in the Bitcoin space has made me appreciate, and actually learn more about what money actually is. It's one of these things you don't really learn in school. And the more you learn about Bitcoin, it turns out there's some fiat games going on.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. I think that's one of the big positives that's come out of Bitcoin that's maybe not addressed enough is that Bitcoin has really forced a whole generation of people to learn about money. And my background is in markets and in trading. And, I learned more in Bitcoin than I did in like a decade of working at a bank.
Absolutely. I've seen the same from like Thomas Farah is one of the guys I follow on Twitter. And he had such a great tweet about how he studied economics in university and worked in finance for years and years. And he didn't understand money until he learned what Bitcoin was.
Yeah. And so you're joining us from South Africa. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. I'm in Johannesburg, South Africa. I was born and raised here.
What's the Bitcoin economy like in South Africa? You hear a lot about Africa. On the tokenized security side, we've had a bit of interest from Africa, but haven't really seen a ton of signups on the platform from that kind of region. So I'd be keen to hear about what your thoughts are on what's going on with Bitcoin in the region.
Absolutely, yeah. It's definitely an emerging market here. And I think it's partly complicated by the fact that there's a massive wealth inequality from South Africa's very checkered past. And so you have almost two sides of that equation where we have Bitcoin exchanges and, I would say the middle class of folks who have more money to save might use Bitcoin, although I don't think it's that popular here yet. But what is much more interesting to me personally is the circular economies that are getting started in places like Bitcoin Ekasi and Bitcoin Witstrand down in the Cape, where their quality of life is far lower and their incomes are much lower, and the guys that are bringing Bitcoin to them are paying the surfer kids and the instructors in Bitcoin, as well as onboarding a lot of the shops. So they have this cool circular economy going on there, and everyone's learning about Bitcoin there.
So it sounds a little bit like El Salvador in terms of the grassroots kind of Bitcoin beach type of stuff.
Yeah, I would say so. I would say it's like a proto El Salvador at the moment where, the beach communities are just getting started on that front. Unfortunately, we don't have a leader like Bukele, a sort of visionary, who would make Bitcoin a legal tender here in South Africa. I wonder if that'll ever be the case because here, the government is very corrupt and and there's a strong undercurrent of communism and socialism from the BRICS nations like Russia and China that South Africa is involved with, and so the corruption runs deep, unfortunately.
Well, I mean, I guess that was the history of El Salvador too, is they had a corrupt economy and were plagued by gangs and violence, and really more than Bitcoin or anything, I think that was kind of the foundation that set them up for the path to economic success that they seem to be on now. Is there anyone in the region, do you think, that is kind of Bitcoin curious or could be a potential, El Salvador within Africa?
Offhand, I don't even know. I think we truly need like a visionary to come out of the newer generation of folks, because the older generations are sort of stuck in their ways and their complaints about the past, and it does have an extremely bad past, but it has been 30 years of democracy for South Africa, and the state-owned institutions are just crumbling. We have load shedding, which is rolling blackouts of electricity all the time. There's water issues that are coming up. So yeah, unfortunately, no Bitcoin visionaries yet.
Yeah. Well, I guess that's also, the other important thing about El Salvador is that it's a proof of concept. And if we all kind of get Bitcoin right in El Salvador and the economy takes off and we can show that Bitcoin and Bitcoin-based, capital markets on my end, if that can be accretive to the economy, then that's a template that we can apply to other countries. And I think we'll naturally pull in more people over time.
Absolutely. As you say, I think as it gets proven and their economy just leaps and bounds above other countries, they'll use that template.
Yeah, so you gave a presentation recently in Cape Town about second layers and emerging economies. What did you mean by fairer Bitcoin for the global South? What was kind of the thesis or the focus of that presentation?
So the presentation started with sort of a comparison between the median incomes between the first world countries and the global South, and for example, South Africa's median income is about $5,000 per year, whereas the US is closer to $50,000 a year. So with half of people earning less than that, when the fees get very high on Bitcoin, which we expect with more adoption, it becomes multi-day wages for someone to pay $30, $40, $50 in transaction fees on the base layer. And that's why we believe, Lightning, Liquid, and Fedimint and other layer 2 protocols can help onboard people in the global South where they just cannot afford those kind of fees. And so there must be some kind of trade-offs. And the presentation went on to go talk about those trade-offs between Liquid and Lightning and Fedimint.
And can you kind of explain what those three solutions are, like the differences between Liquid, Fedimint, and Lightning, because they're all similar in some ways and different in others?
Right. As layer 2s, they all have some kind of trade-offs, because if it were possible to do trustless scaling on the base layer, then it would just be included in Bitcoin itself. So the trade-offs that they make are, Lightning is a peer-to-peer network on top of the base layer, and these parties create channels amongst each other, which can have multiple transactions off-chain before they're resettled onto the chain. Liquid works slightly differently, where it's a side chain, but it's pegged to the Bitcoin main chain, verifiably one-to-one, where Liquid Bitcoin held by the Federation is cryptographically proven to be one-to-one of the Liquid Bitcoin that's on the network. And then Fedimint also works as a federation, but it can be a community federation of custodians, and it works with Xiaomi and eCash, which also has its own trade-offs.
So what do you think are the big trade-offs specifically for Liquid?
I would say that with Liquid, you are trading some trust and decentralization for the speed of transactions and having low fees. So you have slightly better security than Lightning, because your keys can still remain offline in a hardware signer like the Blockstream Jade. Whereas with Lightning, the keys need to be online to sign those channel updates. Lightning is obviously a bit faster, whereas Liquid has 1-minute block times. And they're both fairly private. Liquid also has confidential transactions.
Yeah, and in your presentation, I think how you mentioned that the trilemma is really like a...
Trilemma, yeah.
Yeah, but the trilemma, but there's only really two choices, right? Because security is a must.
That's right. It's a trilemma where security is a must. You're dealing with money, and so any hacks and funds going lost or missing is just unacceptable. And so your choices really are between decentralization and scalability. And the Bitcoin base layer obviously prioritizes decentralization for its censorship resistance and to make sure that there's no centralized control of the protocol, whereas Liquid trades some of that decentralization for scalability in terms of lower fees and faster transactions. And Lightning is still more decentralized, but trades a little bit of the security for more scalability.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I think there seems to be a lot more going on in interoperability between Liquid and Lightning in the last couple of months. You can actually, if you look at the Lightning network capacity chart, it looks like there's a slight downtick and then a big uptick in Liquid. So it looks like there's some interaction between the two, quite a significant bit of interaction, actually.
I think so. I mean, with all the high fees in the past year, we've seen quite an uptick in usage on Liquid. And what I love using is Bolt's swap. Bolt's exchange, and it's very easy, fast swaps between Lightning and Liquid. So I find it great to use Liquid as a middle ground between those things. If you're buying some Bitcoin on exchange and withdrawing with Lightning, hopefully, until Liquid gets implemented there, you can swap to Liquid when your channel is getting full, manage your UTXOs on Liquid, swap to USDT if you need to manage any volatility risk, and then when you need to spend again, you could always swap back into Lightning as you need to, or if your stack gets to a certain threshold, you can then peg out to the Bitcoin main chain for your cold storage.
Maybe another point to touch on is Elements and Liquid. There's, I guess, always a little bit of confusion between the two. Can you explain the difference between the two of them?
Sure. Elements is a software fork of Bitcoin Core, which means that it's a copy of Bitcoin with additional features. And each year we merge in changes from upstream, which is Bitcoin Core, which means that Elements gets to benefit from the community's improvements to Bitcoin. Elements adds additional features like confidential transactions and the verifiable peg to the main chain. And that means that Elements and Bitcoin share about 80% of their code. Liquid, on the other hand, is just one instance of a sidechain that uses Elements as the underlying software to run the sidechain blockchain. There is additional software that the functionaries run to produce the blocks and to sign the transactions.
And Blockstream is the technical provider for the Liquid network. Could you explain what that means? What Blockstream's role is?
That's right. Blockstream is the technical provider for the Liquid network and the Liquid Federation, which means that Blockstream works on the software at on the roadmap that the technology board of the Liquid Federation specifies. And so Blockstream is working on the software and helping with deployments onto the functionaries as necessary to assist the functionary operators.
Got it. And how does the Liquid Federation work with the functionary operators and the functionaries?
So the Liquid Federation has roughly 60 members or more at the moment, and 15 of those members are functionary operators. The functionary is the server and the HSM, which is a hardware security module. And these functionaries are the signers and block producers of the Liquid network.
Yeah, and one kind of bit of pushback you get on the Liquid network is that it's controlled by Blockstream. So how does that fit in relative to the functionary operators and the technology board that you mentioned? Who has control over Liquid and the direction in which it develops?
Yeah, so these functioning operators are actually a geographically dispersed group of exchanges and companies and members of the Liquid Federation that have full control over their functionary and what software is deployed on them. So Blockstream can't make any unilateral changes to the Liquid network. We purely just work on the software that is requested by the technology board, and when they have consensus to deploy changes, they will discuss them with the functionary operators, and in turn, they may go through the process of making those upgrades.
And in terms of integration, how difficult is it for businesses and exchanges to integrate Liquid?
I would say that it's not very difficult. If you already have Bitcoin integration, it's not that much more work to provide a Liquid integration as well. It's a matter of running an Elements node, keeping it synced, keeping it linked to the Bitcoin node, and verifying the peg-ins and peg-outs. I would say maybe the only slightly more difficult challenge is making sure to keep your liquidity high enough. And I'm sure that's an ongoing concern with all the coins that exchanges have integrated. So it's really just a matter of staying on top of your liquidity.
So why do you think we have this situation where we really don't have that many exchanges integrating liquid? I think at the moment we've got two, really good sized ones. We've got BitC, BTSE, and then of course Bitfinex, which is probably the biggest. Why aren't we getting, especially in this age of high fees, why aren't we getting more exchanges looking to integrate liquid? And especially liquid for USDT, because it's so cheap and it's so fast.
I really think it's just a matter of time. It's one of those sort of chicken and egg problems where when fees on the main chain are low enough, you don't really need liquid all that much. But when the fees are consistently high, and that time is coming, I see a lot more exchanges will be integrating and providing liquid withdrawals, because it just makes sense to do so. The fees are so much lower. The speed is much, much higher. I know that exchanges here often way overcharge for Bitcoin withdrawals on the main chain. So even if fees are reasonable, you're still paying a premium because they do it purely to reduce their support burden. They way overshoot fees to make sure they end up in the next block.
Yeah, do you feel that's changing? I mean, if you look at the the liquid capacity chart, it definitely is up and to the right. So I think the numbers show that it's changing. But anecdotally, I think I find more people that are interested in liquid and asking about liquid. So it does feel like there's a bit of an inflection point, I think, coming.
Absolutely, yeah. As I say, we've seen a large uptick in usage in the last year. And interestingly, there's been a lot of usage from China, and there's been a lot of usage from some of the ordinals and inscription folks who are busy working on new ways to do that. And the liquid is a perfect place for testing new technologies for Bitcoin before getting to the base layer.
What kind of testing is going on with covenants, and what is the potential integration, do you think, eventually with the Bitcoin main chain?
I'm no expert on covenants by any means, but I do know that Liquid already has checksig from Stack, which is a covenant opcode. It has a number of introspection opcodes to help with that, and opcat is also live on Liquid already since a number of years with the Taproot upgrade. And as I say, Liquid is a perfect test bed for these kind of new opcodes and new applications using them to be experimented with on Liquid before really nailing down what needs to happen on the main chain. Because I know there's a number of different covenant proposals as well as other various opcodes, and I think it's already showing signs of great difficulty on trying to come to a consensus on which is the right way to go. I feel that if these covenant implementers and proposers have a really great proof of concept or application on Liquid, it could really help to drive that conversation forward.
Does it make it harder to make changes going forward as Bitcoin becomes bigger and the stakes get higher and you get more sophisticated participants from different parts of the world? Does it make it harder to make changes like implementing covenants on the main chain? Does that get harder and you need to have like a stronger proof of concept, maybe something demonstrated on Liquid?
I think so. That makes a lot of sense to me because I already see quite a massive schism between the people that know we need some kind of changes to the base layer to encourage layer 2 development, to make things like Arc a reality. And then you get the other side of the coin, which is the ossify crowd, which doesn't want Bitcoin to be changed at all. And I completely understand that view. But for hyper-Bitcoinization to happen, we are going to need more scaling opportunities on the base layer, just so that layer 2s and above can use those features to have additional scaling.
You also wrote an article about Bitcoin and Liquid code base parity. Can you explain what you mean by that?
Yeah, absolutely. So as I mentioned, because Elements is a software fork of Bitcoin Core, that article was describing the process that we go through each year to upgrade Elements to a newer version to stay up to par with Bitcoin. And last year we spent a number of months merging in PRs from upstream. And it's mostly smooth sailing until it isn't. And you get some kind of major code conflict, which has to be resolved very carefully. All the tests need to be checked and potentially updated. And so it's an ongoing process that we have to try to keep up with Bitcoin. And, because obviously Elements differs in a very few key ways, like the wallet with confidential transactions. And so when upstream PRs touch that code, you're very likely to get some kind of conflict. And then it's sort of all of your progress over the past week or two gets slowed right down as you go through with the fine-tooth comb to decide, how do our changes affect what's changed from upstream, and how do we resolve those issues?
Byron, you just mentioned confidential transactions. Can you explain a bit about what those are and how they benefit different types of users, average investors, or even institutional investors?
Sure. Confidential transactions means that the amount in the transaction is blinded and hidden from anyone who is not the sender or receiver of that transaction. Now, because Elements and Liquid also have asset issuance, the type of the asset is also blinded. And so when you look at a confidential transaction, you can't tell whether it's liquid Bitcoin or whether it's USD Tether or what kind of asset is being sent in the transaction. And you also can't see the amount. So in terms of privacy, this is a great benefit against chain analysis and that sort of snooping and prying and history tying together. If you've posted one of your addresses somewhere on Bitcoin, then someone can see where those coins have moved to or from and start to keep track and build up this picture. And so for the regular user, I see this as just the kind of privacy you would expect in your transactions. And for institutional investors or participants, I see this as a great way to make sure that there's no front running of their investment opportunities and that sort of thing.
Byron, you mentioned the asset issuance feature. So that's obviously something we're fairly familiar with at Bitfinex Securities. We've done a couple of liquid-based security token issuances already. We have a bunch more in the pipeline in El Salvador. Can you maybe talk a little bit about that functionality and how it works with AMP?
Sure. So that's one of the fundamental features that is included in Elements that's not in the Bitcoin source code itself. And it works by creating new assets. Anyone can issue their own assets. How they are backed is up to the company issuing the assets themselves. As you know, with USD Tether, they have a company which will redeem dollars for those assets on Liquid and other chains. And Blockstream also has a number of assets like the basic note and the Blockstream mining notes, which are issued on Liquid. And the way that AMP works is for when you do need securities and KYC and regulation, AMP can assist in making sure that the participants using those assets have been verified and authorized to purchase them or send them to other participants.
Got it, which is obviously a key feature for security tokens because, regulators are really, a lot of the security token business, it's a centralized industry, right? We need to have registries, company needs to know who the shareholders are, and regulators need to make sure that the assets aren't going to go into places that are maybe not appropriate or not desired. So I think that's really one of the killer applications for Liquid.
Exactly. Unlike Bitcoin, which is a decentralized commodity, these securities are backed by centralized companies that must be held to the regulations of where they are. And so Liquid has that capability, and with AMP, these companies can make sure that they follow the regulations of where they are in order to stay. What's the word?
Out of jail.
To stay on the right side of the law.
To stay compliant. Yeah, the right side of the law.
Compliant,
exactly
that's
right.
the word I was looking for.
Yeah. Finally, where should businesses and exchanges that are looking to integrate Liquid, where should they go for more resources or information?
I would say the first port of call is liquid.net, where you can find various documentation, developer docs, and stuff like that, as well as elementsproject.org, which is the website for Elements Project and can lead you to the GitHub website. There's also a tutorial there for how to run Elements as a sidechain, peg to Bitcoin, how to issue your own assets, and besides that, I think also the Blockstream support forums are a good place to go, as well as the new build on L2 Liquid community, which is community.liquid.net.
That's great. Thanks a lot, Byron. Appreciate your time today.
Thanks so much, Jesse. See you soon.